I went outside just before the program and I picked some objects in my garden. Do you recognize butter beans? How about green beans? Fresh. I'll tell you what, that is good. Or you could have an apple cucumber from my garden. Or if you like making yourself a spinach or chard, mix it with cheese and a bit of garlic and stew it up. And I tell you what, it's hard to beat. Add a bit of bacon. Oh, sorry. The vegans wouldn't do that. So when you have a look at our world today, we have many worldviews, even governing diet. Now, in the beginning, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God made man in his image. And when you have a look at the next couple of verses, before it says everything God made was very good, he tells you about diet. He told Adam that all the animals would eat plants. So there's a biblical worldview on the animals, no matter what shape their teeth, they started out being plant eaters, fruit eaters, vegetable eaters, etc. Perhaps they could have come to my garden and picked some of the rarer fruits. Do you recognize that? You're quite right. It is related to a tomato, but it's a pepino. It's a beautiful fruit. It goes gold, and then the inside is like a solid tomato with a peachy flavour. Very nice. And of course, if I need a bit of activity, I can go and pick my own coffee. Yep, these are coffee beans. I don't necessarily use 40 beans to a cup, but in reality, I can grow caffeine. There's all sorts of things that you can plant in your home garden and stay in accordance with the biblical picture in Genesis 1. God told Adam all the animals would eat plants. God told Adam man would eat plants. So if you want a biblical perspective, man starts as a vegetarian, so you would have all the digestive enzymes to actually demolish in your stomach all of those complicated proteins and that you find in plants, all the carbohydrates, etc. You want to extract. That's where your starting point would be if you wanted to study digestion. But halt, before you go any further and say, well, we need to be vegetarian and leave the plants alone, you'll find that when God gave Noah a new set of instructions for a post-flood world in Genesis chapter 9 and Genesis chapter 8, he tells you at the end, the world has no longer going to be the same. From now on, he tells Noah, there'll be summer, there'll be winter, there'll be seed time, there'll be harvest. Do you realize there were seasons now for the first time? A biblical worldview includes a world that originally had no extremes of season. Noah didn't have to plan out his crops because he could have planted anything at any time and done really well. And if you're like Noah, remember the biblical picture of age? He lived to be 930 years old. Even if you only learned by your mistakes, you could be a genius in all that time, particularly about diet. But God comes to Noah and says, from now on, you are free to eat the animals. Read through the end of chapter 8 up to chapter 9 and verse 6. But God says, you are not free to eat the blood. Now, in Scotland, they eat blood. In Germany, they eat blood. Bloodwurst or haggis in Scotland. I'll tell you what, I've got myself into lots of trouble by actually telling Christians, hey, you haven't got a biblical worldview. Here you are hoeing into a pile of bloody haggis and you think you're being Christian. No, a biblical worldview says God tells you you won't eat blood. Now you say, but I don't understand that. We need all the nutrition we can get here in Scotland. By the way, that's really true. Black pudding is the same in Germany, out of a blood derivative. The CSIRO out here has been experimenting for years on turning in all the waste blood, not just into blood and bone fertilizer, but into usable foods in a world that has trouble growing enough food. Biblical worldview, sorry, don't do it that way. Even if all you think of this is a picture of well, what did the Bible say? God told Noah, God told Abraham, God told the Jews, you won't eat blood because the life is in the blood. And Jesus, and before he was crucified, took the grapes, squashed them. You have your wine there, that's the squashed grape juice in a bottle. And he said, this is my blood. So there's a spiritual importance here. What's your worldview? So our program, our aim, our agenda at creation science, the creation research rather, is to get you to think biblically. In fact, I'm going to ask Diane a couple of questions in a moment. And the first one she can prepare for is, what does she think the Bible is? But before that, because Diane's background is in medicine and she's been a real blessing to us in giving us medical details and running the science news that we put out every week or two. Diane, I remember when we have a look at medical experiments and studies of rats. You study 10,000 rats and say, here's how they react to this chemical. Therefore, given 3 tons of it in your lifetime, a human being will react the same way as a rat. Now, I've always had a struggle with that, because the one thing I've noticed about people is that if you want to study people's guts, it's no good to study monkeys, because monkeys' digestion does not match people's. Neither does rats to the fullest degree. If you want to know what animal you need to study that's the closest to human digestion, just remember one thing: people eat like pigs. Ha, they do. We study pig digestion to learn as much as we can about human digestion. But there are limits to all of these studies, and our limitations are the fact that God has given us authority to kill pigs, to kill animals, to have dominion. As Joseph said, that's a biblical worldview. I have the right to tell my dog to stay outside while I'm doing this program. And some of you have seen the dog loves to come in, give me a good old lick and cuddle. I've got the right to tell him. Who gave me that right? God did. God gave Adam the right to exercise authority over the animals, so they are not our equals.